in a moment.
Okay. All right then, everybody. So welcome to our fifth and final live stream in this series on ADHD. Just a reminder, this is a safe space for open and honest discussions about ADHD, which affects millions of people worldwide, including all of us. We want to provide you with valuable insight, share our personal experiences, and also try and create a supportive community for those impacted by the condition. And it's all in honor of ADHD Awareness Month. So last week we explored sensory overload, emotional regulation or dysregulation, and rejection sensitivity. This week, we're going to be exploring the unique set of skills and strengths which people with ADHD have. So while ADHD is typically associated with challenges in focus and impulse control, it is important to recognize the positive attributes that individuals with ADHD can exhibit. So some of the skills and strengths commonly found in people with ADHD include creativity, as our minds tend to wander, enabling us to think outside the box and come up with innovative ideas and solutions. Hyperfocus, paradoxically, individuals with ADHD can experience hyperfocus where we become deeply engrossed in a task or activity that interests us. Resilience, many of us have had to develop resilience as we face challenges and setbacks throughout our lives. Flexibility, we can often be adaptable and flexible in our thinking as we're more accustomed to shifting our attention and adapting to changing circumstances. Problem solving, many people with ADHD can find creative solutions to problems in high pressure environments. Empathy, some individuals with ADHD are highly empathetic and attuned to the emotions of others. And finally, risk-taking, willingness to take risks can be an advantage in certain circumstances. So it's important to remember that ADHD does affect each person differently. Not everyone with ADHD will possess all of these strengths. And just a note that the presence of these strengths doesn't negate the challenges that individuals with ADHD may face. So before we start exploring these areas, just remember that discussing mental health and neurodevelopmental disorders can be triggering. So we encourage everyone to prioritize their mental well-being during the stream. If you do feel overwhelmed, don't hesitate to step away, seek support, or use the available resources in your community. We remember to use the chat box and comment box. We'll be responding to your questions and comments as we go through the session today. Just a quick introduction. I'm Sarah. My pronouns are she, her. I'm based in Athens and I'm a teacher trainer working with Altonics. This is my colleague, Lottie. Lottie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I've been working in ELT for about 25 years. I started out as a teacher, and for the last 12 years, I've been working in ELT publishing. And now I mainly look at how to make materials more inclusive and better represent the world around us. And I was diagnosed formally with ADHD last year, although I've suspected that I've had it for a number of years.
Thank you, Lottie. We've also got Kristen with us as well. Kristen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kristen. I'm also based in Greece and I'm an archaeologist as well as an educator. I've been teaching for over 20 years now, first as martial arts, then at teaching archaeology in universities, and now I teach archaeology as well as teaching English as a second language.
Super. Okay, we've also got JPB. Another introduction from you.
All right, for the fourth time. Yeah, Dr. JP Gerald. I live in New York. My main job is as a sort of curriculum developer and instructional leader at a nonprofit, but I also adjunct, really for fun, teaching teachers, and I write books about racism, language teaching, and disability, so it kind of works out.
Super, thank you so much. And last but not least, Natasha.
Hi, I'm Natasha. I'm based in the UK, but I was previously based in Asia for about 15 years. I'm a former teacher, teacher trainer, and now I work in safeguarding for a large international charity.
Oh,
Super.
hi guys.
Hi, thank you, Natasha. And we're just joined by Saskia. Saskia, brief introduction.
Yes, hi. Sorry, I was on a different screen, so I didn't see that you'd let me in. Hi, everyone. Not good at multitasking. So my name's Saskia. I'm a language teacher. I'm based in the south of France, and I'm happy to be here for the last session, and I hope I can contribute.
All right, let's get started. Lottie, do you have a question for us?
Yes. So we've thought a lot in the last few weeks about kind of not necessarily the negative sides, but some of the things that people with ADHD can experience that can be negative. So I thought it might be useful for us just to think about what the positives are that manifest. I don't know if you want to start with that answer, Sarah.
You were choppy.
Oh, was I? Okay. Yeah. I said it so well as well. Okay, should I have another go?
Okay.
Yeah, please.
I was so witty and intelligent. Okay, so discussions of ADHD are often very negative, but in fact, all the things that we've looked at in the last few weeks bring many positives. So, as Sarah said, empathy, a sense of justice, creativity, problem solving. I'm wondering if some of the guests want to share some of the ways that ADHD shows up positively for them, and whether you want to start, Sarah. By choppy?
No, that I got that totally. Yeah, very clear. Thank you. Okay, well, I guess two things come to mind. I mean, part of what I focus my work on is how to teach creative thinking. That's together with C. Steele, my colleague, and I think thinking creatively is something that I'm pretty good at. I wasn't explicitly taught this. So, I mean, I think it's because my mind wanders and I'm trying to, I end up thinking of many different things at once, and I'm kind of synthesizing all of these, and the results can be quite unusual. So maybe that, but then I don't want to go ahead and say I'm a really creative person, because sometimes I'm not. The circumstances have to be right, but I think it helps, is what I'm saying. I'm not saying I'm super creative, but I think for sure it's something to do with the way that my mind processes information. But I would say that another thing is empathy. And this was really present when I was a kid. So I remember feeling, I'm going to sound so weird, but all right, let's just go with it. I remember feeling extremely guilty if like I played with one toy more than another. Like I'd feel like I'd really left that toy out, or it could be using one fork more than another fork. I mean, it gets ridiculous, or stuff like this sense of fairness, and also maybe in school kind of feeling the need to stand up for others, and that's maybe something that continues to this day. So yeah, so I think this comes from overthinking as well. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
I'm just curious what you mean by creativity as well, because does that for you mean sort of painting or drawing or writing, or is it something different from that?
I think it's something different. I'm not a great artist at all. I do some writing, but it's nothing that I would show anybody else really. But I think it's the process of problem solving. Like you know, if there's say I'm trying to design a webinar from scratch, which is something that I do pretty often, or create a material, then I'll have a ton of different ideas, and they're all kind of weird and wonderful, and I'll try and bring them together in a way that maybe some of my colleagues won't have thought of. Some of them will have, but some of them won't have. So I think it's about playing around with ideas, making mistakes, not worrying about those, going to another really weird idea, this kind of stuff. Or maybe saying stuff like, sometimes I ask questions to people and they're really weird, like, where would you hide a giraffe was something that came out of my mouth in a webinar like just last week. This kind of stuff I'm talking about. I'm not saying that I'm a really good painter or anything like that. Mm-hmm. It's more the process that the yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense to me. And I think sometimes it's the fact that you have so many ideas. So I tend to get lots of ideas, and because there are so many of them, the chances are, that some of them are going to be good and some of them are going to be interesting. So it's possibly that there are more ideas that allow that kind of creativity as well. So what about you, Kristen? Does any of what Sarah has been saying sound familiar?
Yeah, definitely, I think. And it's something which my process, I've only been diagnosed officially this year, but even before that, like I've always taken some kind of pride in the fact that I think differently, that it's like and that is who I am. That is who I am. And since finding out that it's my ADHD and reading more about it, I've just I really love my associational brain. I love that I bounce all over the place, and I don't need to take the straight line. It's infuriating when sometimes you need to stay on track. But I won't go into that. But it's definitely a superpower that I can get, I can jump and bring things in and make connections. And for my line of work, especially my archaeology, it's like I have insights and thoughts when we're putting puzzle pieces together with very little evidence, and I can kind of actually rethink it and relook at it. And so, yeah, the creative thinking. I also am creative. I'm both hyperactive and inattentive. And my inattentive was the dreamer. I'd be lost making up stories in artworks, thinking about things, looking at the pretty in the leaves or the details or whatever. But my art style's like hyper detailed. It's something where I get focused, and it encourages my hyperfocus as I go in and get absorbed and consumed by it. And so that's something that comes through in all of my work, that hyper focus where I'll procrastinate till the cows come home. I shouldn't say this live, but I really left my PhD to the last minute. It took me 6.5 years to do, and I really only pulled it out of my backside in the last 18 months. And 6 weeks before the deadline, I almost didn't have a PhD. I'd written too much because I'd gone too much into the detail. And I had one of my supervisors say, you have enough words, just restructure, cut out what you originally intended to do. What you've done is good enough. And in the end, my thesis passed with no corrections because I'd covered a lot of detail and my brain had brought these ideas. So I think it can be hard if you are trying to resist the way your brain works, and it definitely has disadvantages. But that ability to problem solve, think outside the box. And my dad was a troubleshooter. He's so totally where I get this from. He couldn't project manage and sustain it into the long term. It got too boring. But have a crisis, come on in, immerse yourself, solve it, swan off into the sunset. Like, he made a fortune doing that in the end. Like, he went for ages not being able to do much, but then he became successful once he found his niche. But yeah, and as a teacher, the empathy is a huge superpower. It's that sense of fairness as well that saw me at university. It's ultimately why I left university, because universities don't value students' education. It's what they're selling, that we were not being paid to actually give students the education, but I would still give people extra time marking tasks so that they could learn what they're here to learn and actually get from that. And I know I'm very approachable and a good sort of team member as well because of that. I can kind of be sort of so logical about it. I have a sense of fairness and whatnot. It can be dangerous if I feel like something is unfair, and I can get very distracted and caught up in that. But it is also, so long as it's pointed in the direction. I mean, but basically, if you give me a box, I'll think outside it. But if you don't give me anything but a blank page, I'll not touch it forever and be crippled with indecision and not be able to come up with anything because I'm coming up with millions of things. But I need a box, and then I'll think outside it. So, yeah.
A little bit of structure is useful just to get you started, to rebel against almost.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Okay, what about you, JPB? What are your superpowers?
I've been thinking, since you were all talking, about the best way to describe it. Since on a chemical level, a lot of ADHD is related to misfiring dopamine receptors, right, in the brain. And the standard ADHD medication is for that, although for me, I'm only taking medication for emotional stuff. Outside of it, it's a low dose. But for me, I think that obviously, as I talked about in previous episodes, think when I was struggling socially or whatever, it was much harder to do what I'm about to say. But now that I guess I'm older and I'm in a better place professionally and, with marriage and so forth, there's a lot of fog that's clear. And now that the fog is clear, I can sort of understand a lot of things that were always true, but were sort of being blocked by circumstances. Which is to say, what I think a lot of us are talking about is consilience, right? That term where you're bringing a whole bunch of different sources together to come to an argument, right? That's why so many of us do academic things, because that's what you're doing, right? When you're making some of these arguments. What makes, I think, my work, and I do think, although I write nonfiction stuff, it is creative, because if you're not putting any creativity into your writing, then why are you doing it? People are probably surprised by where I'm pulling evidence from, and I'm not always pulling evidence from the standard places, because that's the standard places usually haven't covered the things I want them to cover. Also, in terms of sort of what we've talked about, compensation mechanisms, I think sometimes about how, because I struggled socially and didn't fit in with my peers, I chose a different career path that only worked out eventually. But at first, I just didn't want to be around those people, right? If I hadn't had ADHD, or if my ADHD hadn't manifested in such a way that I struggled socially, I probably would end up doing what everybody else is doing. And it's kind of a impossible thing to disprove, because if I fit in with them, I don't think I would have hated it, right? But so I can't say would I have been miserable. Yes, I would have been miserable, but I also wouldn't have done it. But anyway, and so a few of us have mentioned the sense of justice. Things don't feel right, and unfairness, especially very important in teaching. It's important in the writing that I do. And, not fitting in also made it so that I understood when people felt excluded. I really don't like to let people down. So if I've got something and it needs to be done, I'm just going to do it. I'm just gonna do it myself, which is not ideal for delegating work sometimes, but I'd rather it be done than it sit there. And I have sort of boundless energy sometimes. It's not always physical energy. I mean, I do fall asleep, but there's always something going on in my head. And now that, again, things are in a better place for me, I'm much better able to predict what will provide the dopamine, and I'm able to construct my life in such a way that there's not too much time in between the things that will do that. Obviously, there's things you got to do every day you want to do, but by 7 o'clock, I'm going to get some, right? Or by 5 p.m., it's going to happen, right? Or whatever. And it just means that I'm bouncing from cloud to cloud of dopamine. And as long as I know that there's another one ahead, I can do stuff forever, forever, right? I had never run more than a 5K before 2013. And then by the end of that year, I'd run a marathon because I wanted to, right? And then 2 years later, I said, maybe I'll run more, though. I ran 3 in 6 weeks at one point, right? And I didn't just do it. I was really good at it. And I was never an athlete, right? You see me now, I look more like one. That's because I've been running for 10 years now. But back then I hadn't, right? So if I want to do something, again, if I'm in a good enough place, and since then, because it was the running that actually got me to a place where I was able to figure out that I wanted to go back to school and meet my wife and start doing the stuff and eventually get the diagnosis. In the last 10 years, I've been able to kind of do whatever it is I want to do, as long as there aren't too many obstacles in my way. And there's the thing, it's a classist thing to say, but now that I have the title, now people kind of let me do what I want to do, and I'm able to just keep going.
Okay, really interesting. No. I'm absorbing, but that was a lot. And I think it's really great how you mentioned managing your dopamine, because I think that's really important. It helps to keep us on a level, and bouncing from one point of dopamine to another sounds really, really helpful.
That's also why people get into addictive behaviors too, mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Because if you can't get it, you just, well, that feels good. So.
Yeah, for sure. C says that we all sound very self-aware, and I think that's absolutely true. You know, if you are aware of the way that you behave, and you have to, you know, the way the world is necessitates you putting coping mechanisms in place, it does make you quite self-aware, and I guess that kind of also helps with the empathy as well. Natasha, I wonder whether you wanted to add something here.
I think just to pick up on something slightly different, I think one of the superpowers I have is that curiosity. I'm not satisfied with just knowing something. I need to know why it is the way it is, how it is that it works. It's a level beyond just knowing an answer. I'm not happy with just an answer. I want more detail. I want, where did it come from? Who got it there? And I think as a teacher, that really helps me as well, because I want my students to be that curious and to be less accepting of what's there. And if the answer's A, I actually don't care that the answer's A. I want to know, why do you think that? Where's it come from? How did you get there? What other knowledge do you have that made you think that? Can you go a bit further? And it's not just curiosity about things that I need to know. It could be I read something and I don't understand a word and I have to know what that word is. But not just that. I've got to think about word formation. Where did it come from? How did we get here? And so I think that curiosity has fed me quite well. I've had, you know, several career changes in the past 15 years, and that is a big part of the ADHD, not being able to stick with one thing or finding something new that becomes a passion. But mixed with that curiosity is also, as everyone's talking about, the empathy and social and moral justice and injustice. You know, I did my master's in international human rights law for that very reason. I wanted to, one, find out more, mix of that curiosity, but also what impact can I have on the world? And that's why I moved out of teaching back into safeguarding, because I don't understand how other people don't see the injustice around them, or how other people don't. I get very frustrated when people go, and I sit there going, but why would you think that was a good idea? I don't understand. Why didn't you see the other perspectives? So it gives me that. It's also a downside because I've struggled to see the other side. But, you know, it's led me to a career eventually that's very fulfilling and rewarding. And I am less reaching out for those dopamine hits, as JP said. It's because it's all part of what I do every day. I feel more rewarded in what I do. And it's because I get to fulfill the bits and pieces that I need in my life in terms of empathy, moral justice, and curiosity.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it, that where you and JPB have found careers where you feel that you fit and you don't have to mask and you can be yourself, that's where you've really flourished. You know, that's where your skills are being put to use. And I think employers do need to realize this, you know, all of these positive aspects that we can bring. If we're allowed to bring them, then we really can, you know, flourish and do exceptionally well. I wonder, Saskia, whether you wanted to add anything about your particular superpower.
I don't know if it's a superpower, but I'm pretty good at handling crises. And I mean, real big ones like car accidents, things like that. And afterwards, yes, I get this drop in energy and I'm completely empty. But when I'm in the moment, I know exactly what to do. And I like that about myself. And another thing is also because all the situations that I've been in my life, it has made me very resilient. It has made me very strong. And friends, and especially my sister, always give me compliments, because whenever I fall down, whenever I'm in this black pit again, I always manage to get out again. And 9 out of 10 without any help. And then I start a whole new life. So I've not just changed jobs or whatever, I've changed careers completely, had to do educations, follow courses. It's a long list of everything that I've done, but I don't see this as lost time or lose whatever. It always adds something, and it has made me knowledgeable. And because I love learning, and I've got a broad interest, I only see that as very helpful. And every time when I do something now as a teacher, I pick up bits and bobs from other parts of my life where I learned something and I can use it now, which is, it's a pretty cool thing. Yeah, I like that.
I'm wondering, sorry, JPB, do you want to go ahead?
Well, just saying that sort of crisis thing, it's one of the things I think, if people don't know us all that well, or if we haven't told them, or if they haven't read about it or something, that people probably find confounding about us, is that I think that it's sort of opposite of how other people are, and that like a lot of us are really good when the absolute worst thing happens, but then like, why didn't you come to the party? And that's the worst thing that's ever happened. And people are like, why are you so upset about that? But like, I was not particularly phased. Like I was here on like 9/11 and stuff. I mean, it's not that I didn't care, but I was like, I guess I'm gonna go home then, right? Like it was just like I was just handling stuff, and so people will see that you're so even keel at these moments, right? And what I tell people is like, that's because I'm kind of always at an 8. So like, it's not going to be that big of a deal when things are there. But then when something's up just down here at the 2 level, then I'm just, I can't. Less so now, but that's what the deal was.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar. Definitely.
That is, yeah. Just a comparison to that, like and reflecting on kind of what you were all saying, I think I've just realized, like literally just now, that I've lived and worked in, I think, 8 different countries. And at one point I was changing this every 12 months. It was just me in a backpack and I don't know, that was it. And it didn't faze me. I knew nobody in that country. I just arrived. Most of the time I didn't really plan ahead. I just rocked up and thought, okay, I'll find somewhere to stay. It'll work. And at the same time, I can't make a freaking phone call to my bank. Like that paralyzes me. And that that looks like huge inconsistency. Because a friend of mine always used to say this. So you turn up in, I don't know, this country with no plan, yet you can't, I don't know, order something online.
Yeah, can I?
Phone call.
Sorry.
Oh, no, sorry.
I keep jumping over each other. Do you want to go, Kristen?
I know. I was just going to sort of jump. I keep thinking people are finished, and then that impulsive ADHD me is going for that immediate gap. But yeah, no. Just to jump on the back of what's been said with JPB, and also Saskia mentioned the resilience, and there was the comment that somebody had made about like how self-aware we are. And I think that like what JPB said was really pertinent, that like we're always operating up here, and that we need, like, it needs to be about somebody else for me to show up because of that empathy and care. Like when I'm here and I should be doing my Taekwondo training, it's really hard because I'm on my own. When I was teaching, I was training 6 days a week, and I was doing about 30 hours of training because I'd show up for my students and then I'd stay on and train for me. And it's like, yeah, can't do it. And it's that same when you're used to operating at that like intense, and you need that pressure, but you also go mental with it because you're trying to deal with it and you've been pulling yourself apart. And like, I didn't get to be this self-aware straight away. I'm very good at being aware of other people with the empathy and things, but I was not so good at being kind to myself. And it took going through burnout, a divorce, nearly kind of having a massive existential crisis and a few other things and re-jumping positions a bit to finally understand myself better and give myself the same priority and kindness. And I still suck at it. I still don't show up for me, but like, yeah, give it a 2, as JPB said. And as Sarah said, like, I've been trying to ship my gear from Australia to Greece for 2 years now. I was back and forward emailing with a shipping company, and I cannot do that. I just cannot do that. So yeah, I will solve drama. I will pull things out. I love a good high pressure environment. But yeah, low key.
Yeah, I think the self-awareness though, I'm just speaking for myself here, comes from the diagnosis. That like it's like the puzzle pieces fall into place. I remember when I got diagnosed, some people saying, "You don't have ADHD." I was infuriated. This really annoyed me when some, okay, let's put that aside. Getting a bit emotional there. Yeah, but first of all, the diagnosis, I think, helps you reflect. And I think we are generally quite reflective because we're overthinkers, or we're deep thinkers, whatever you want to call it. I don't think I would have been this self-aware without the diagnosis, to be honest, because it's taken a hyper-focus on ADHD and researching it and trying to figure out what is it that this thing is and what does it look like. Generally in my life, I think for this awareness to kind of be there. And I think this is why some, if you have ADHD and you're not diagnosed, this can be really, really excruciatingly painful. Yeah, anyway.
Just Sarah, just to add to that, I think something else that I'm sure many, if not all of us have been through is whether it was misdiagnosis or whether it was other issues that were diagnosed, but I'm sure a lot of us have been through, whether it's talk therapy, whether it's other forms of therapies, just trying to find answers to questions, because we do want answers that we've actually, through that process, through diagnosis, through our experiences, become very good self-advocates. We are no longer accepting of what other people are telling us. We have had to become very clear in what we are, who we are, how we work, and that yes, we can be flexible, but at our core, there are some things we just literally can't do. And it's not because we're being difficult, it's not because we're trying to cause trouble. Our brains literally won't let us do it. There is a chemical imbalance that doesn't allow us to do it. And as a result, I think, yeah, that deep thinking, that reflection, that self-awareness, we're also become more outspoken about the conditions that we need to thrive. And all of that plays on all the superpowers that everyone's talked about. It's a difficult journey with some people, but we have become willing to fight it in order to help those coming behind us. And as teachers, we also fight for it for our students as well. Whether it's talking to the number of teachers I've spoken to going, okay, that's your opinion. Go back, look at that child differently. Reframe them in this way. And as a teacher trainer, for me, that's a huge tool that has such an impact. And because I just wish someone, and I'm seeing it in the comments, someone wished someone had done that for them, that had just taken the time to go, not to see you as a problem or a difficult child or a student that's not cooperating, but to reframe that in terms of what can they do, where can they grow, and involving them. So yeah, I think that advocacy part is something that we all have as well. Otherwise we wouldn't be here having this conversation right now.
Yeah, I just want to add something there as well, because we didn't know what to call this session, right? This last one, talking about superpowers. I really like the term superpowers. I know others don't. But the thing is, I've been to too many teacher training sessions on ADHD given by people who don't have ADHD, who talk about us in a problematic way. Like to the point where I've either had to, well, this is a lack of impulse control, right? Like speak out or walk out. But it's like I think this advocacy, or like this kind of trying to help raise awareness of what ADHD is, has to talk about the superpowers that we have, or the skill set that we have, or the particular strengths that we have, just because of the way that our brain is configured, or maybe the experiences that we've had going through very neurotypical school systems and so on. It's essential to talk about those strengths, because otherwise they just get lost and we end up being described as the problem children in the class, or that colleague who's a little bit difficult, who needs everything written down, or whatever it is. So yeah, Natasha, I think this has also helped in terms of like me as a teacher. It helped informed how I teach my students and also how I do teacher development programs as well. But yeah, it's crucial.
I think
Probably, sorry, go on, JPD.
I feel like it's always me and you, right?
I'm just like the worst at interrupting. Just the worst. I'm sorry. Not a superpower.
With the teaching thing, I started teaching randomly, like the overseas thing, like a lot of you all did, right? And I was like 21 and I didn't know what I was doing, which is a problem with the industry. But go read my first book because it's about that. But it's not just about it. Anyway, focus. So, but I figured it out after about a year. First of all, I didn't know what I was doing pedagogically, and I did. Then I had to go back to school for that, which is fine because like that is an underappreciated thing is that they don't like you. It's a real craft. You do have to know some stuff, right? But the connecting with the students part, I got that pretty fast once I figured out a basic thing, which was like I was teaching in South Korea, as I'm sure some people here have, and I found out my students are in school 6 days a week for like 12 hours, right? And like. And then there's just so much pressure on them, right? This part has nothing to do with ADHD, but the point is, well, what value are they going to get from having more pressure from me, right? I had to do things. I couldn't just not do stuff in the class, right? But so we couldn't just hang out. But I said, okay, and I came up with this project for them that they got really, really into, where they got to use a different part of their thinking that they hadn't had a chance to use in class before, right? I came up with that because it was something I used to do by myself, which was like, I had them all make up their own countries and like, what would the laws be in these countries? And I had to call them out. They said they did a couple of racist things. I was like, wait, chill, don't say that. But because they didn't know, but like, because I used to just do that myself, right? Just stuff I used to just make up. And it requires creativity. And because you got to look things up and so forth, and they got really, really into it. And then we had a contest because they wanted to compete. And I said, okay, if I can do that, then I can do that for my students, right? And although I've mostly taught adults since then, I came home and that's just what I ended up doing. It's still true for adults. It's like you assume that these people are the experts on themselves, and there are some things that that they don't know, which is otherwise you wouldn't be a teacher. So how do you find the ground in between and build on that, right? And I wasn't able to articulate that at the beginning, but I learned it later, and I've sort of carried that through into the work that I do now, and it's unfortunate that like so many people have bad experiences both as teachers and students, right? And so in a way, because I'm confident enough to understand that like I know what I'm doing now, right? That people don't, what's really effective connection between teachers and students often is missed because of what people are expecting is just the top-down lecture thing or don't do anything. And I'm like, it's in between there. And I think that having the ADHD has allowed me to sort of find that middle ground, even if, unfortunately, this sort of education that I do is rare, and therefore people don't know what to do with it at first. Then they get on my rhythm and then they like it. It takes them a second.
Okay. I'm talking very tentatively because I know I'm probably going to interrupt someone. So kind of we've been touching on this topic generally, but Sarah's talked about this, JPP's talked about this, about how we help teachers harness students' superpowers, their ADHD superpowers. I'm wondering if Saskia or Kristin, you've got anything to add here?
Yeah, well, as a teacher, of course, I've had loads of children with learning difficulties in my classes. I've taught mostly primary school children in the Netherlands, and because the Netherlands are very active on this subject, so I learned a lot about them. Strangely enough, it never came to my mind that I might be one of them, but that's because I'm an adult, right? It's different for adults than it is for children, especially for women, which I found out, thank God, not too long ago. But I always had these huge antennas, and every year when I had a new group, of course, there's this transfer from the previous teacher to me, and within, now let's say a week, I could spot new ones. I was like, okay, I have to keep an eye on you because, and I had them quite young. They were like 6, 7-ish. So it wasn't always clear that there was a real learning difficulty, but 9 out of 10, I was right. If it didn't show itself when I had them in my classroom, it came out later on. And I sort of did it naturally, I suppose. Maybe because I could feel what I needed as a learner, I automatically applied this to the children. There was always this diversity of calm moments where children who needed to concentrate, who needed this silence, could work, and always moments that they were more free and they could, sort of a good mixture where everybody felt safe. And that, especially feeling safe, that was very important for me. That was number one, and it still is number one on my list. It even is in my contract. If I've got a new student, I send the contract to the parents and they have to agree with that. They have to sign it. No bullying. I'm very strict with this. Even if the child thinks it's a joke, knowing the child, I know it's trying to make a joke, or if it's really, a little bit over the line, crossing the line, and I address it straight away. I explain that even if you think that it's a joke, the person receiving the remark might not feel the same. It might be hurtful for that person. We speak about it. I'm very open about it, and I want my pupils to feel safe. I want them to be happy when they leave, and I want them to arrive with a smile. So yeah, that's very important.
Absolutely, for all students, as you say, not just students who. We've got a question here for you, Saskia. What are your tips? What are your tips for not internalizing these emotions? So the emotions of the student.
Me as a teacher. Mm-hmm. Ooh, that's a hard one to catch, indeed. I guess the best lesson was a remark my dad made a long, long time ago. He said, look, you go to bed and you don't sleep because this child, let's say this child doesn't have any shoes. Because this literally happened to him. He was a teacher too, primary school teacher. But you lie awake, you can't sleep. You wake up, you feel crap in the morning, and yet you have to teach the whole day. You have to be like perky and kind. But does the child have shoes now? Lying awake, has it solved your problem? No, it hasn't. So try to park it somewhere. Try to give it a place and take care of yourself as well. I think that's the best tip I can give. And the next day, of course, see if you can deal with those shoes with the parents or somebody else. You can ask for advice at the school. There's always some kind of school counselor hanging around. So ask that person first. See if you can talk to the parents about it. Be kind, be careful. Yeah.
And how do you park those feelings? Because for me, I find meditation super helpful. I find writing things down so they're not just swimming around in my head quite helpful.
at the time it was writing things down. Now it would be more meditating, and absolutely talk to the school counselor about it. We had a lovely person, her name was Kirsten, and she knew everything. Her door was always open, and she was my rock, so to speak. Yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, I think in language school context, we're not always going to have a school counsellor. So I'm wondering, those of you who work in a context where you might not have a counsellor to support students, what would you do?
Do you mean like? Oh, sorry, Kristen. No, we're doing it. Go first, Kristen. Go.
We all have ADHD. We're all jumping in on top of each other. I find I try to ask questions and not judge. And I think this goes for any context. It's to try to recognize that until we know for sure we're coming up with an excuse or an explanation, that kid's naughty, that kid's whatever, this kid's frustrating. But if you suspect, and it's funny because I once I started asking questions, it turns out that I have several students, just sheer coincidence, that actually are neurodiverse. And either some of them knew, others didn't. But the more I asked questions, and it highlighted that they do need different ways of learning. Like I start every lesson off, regardless of just trying to understand how my students learn. Are they an audio learner, a visual learner, or a kinetic? Do they need to move to remember things, and what combinations they are? And just by asking questions, it gives me more insight, and it usually helps them realize, because I can't be a counselor. I am there to teach. But I try to ask questions and listen, and see if there is something that I can step in and assist with, and just be really open, especially to the fact that we're all we have biases, and I have a big one's the primacy effect. That means the first thing that we were taught or introduced to becomes our guiding reference point for everything. So if you're taught that this is what a good student looks like, this is how you teach. I'm sure JPB can talk about this because he's probably having to do a lot of work to undo a lot of those early assumptions. But there's always an explanation, and it might be neurodiversity, it might be trauma. The older someone gets, the more likely. I mean, we're all walking wounded. The older you get, everyone's got a story. So I find the only thing I can do is ask questions. Otherwise, I'm presuming, and I've got nothing really.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, like you say, behaviour is communication, isn't it? It's telling us something about that student, and we need to listen to that message. Sarah, did you want to add something here?
I was just going to say, there are things that we can do in the classroom all the time, whether students are exhibiting a particular emotion that we want to explore or not. And not just for your neurodiverse students, because we have to remember that we might not know and they might not know, but for all of our students. And I think this is also trying to get away from the idea that, we have to separate out neurodivergent students into different classes, where I really don't think that works. But things that we can do to kind of investigate or get students to kind of understand their emotions, and this, you can do this from kindergarten up, is having an emotions board, and maybe they put a counter on how they're feeling right there and then, and try to get them to locate where they're feeling this in their body, whether that's joy or whether that's stress. Little things like that, or walking into the classroom and they put a lollipop stick in a cup, and one's got a smiley face, one's sort of neutral, and one's like, don't ask me anything today, and kind of trying to respect how your student feels walking into that classroom without them having to necessarily verbalize it, because maybe they can't. And then you can investigate, as Kristen says, by asking, some follow-up questions. But also giving menu choices, because, going back specifically to ADHD, that there's a time in school as a student where, I want to write an essay. I've got it in me and I want to get it out of me. And there's another time that I really don't. Please don't make me write a ton. What I want to do is kind of mind map it out. So if you're giving students, I think, menu choices where you can, then that's really, really helpful. And I think another thing is this assumption, and going back to what Kristen says, sometimes there are these assumptions that people with ADHD are poor performers at school, which again really bugs me. we can't, there's no such thing as a strong student and a weak student at all. We can have strengths in certain areas and weaknesses in certain areas, but generally speaking, we're not an overall strong or an overall weak. I think we have to be able to give students choice over the level of challenge they want to take on as well. And that could be task dependent, you know, so it's not assuming that the person with ADHD in the room needs the easiest task or the most support or the most scaffolding. Let them choose the level of challenge for themselves. Like there's really fun things that you can do, like those chili challenges, you know, where they choose the spiciness of the level of spiciness of the question that they want to answer and so on. And all of these things can be built in and help all students, not just those with ADHD.
Can I add a little? Yeah, just to, I'm getting a weird echo right now. Just to say, I think I've now lost it. But the whole first one thing is the splitting students up. It doesn't work. Like I think diversifying the content, changing it up, and having the options is really, really, really helpful. We had, like, I still remember when I was teaching martial arts, we had this class on a Tuesday nights, and we had a bunch of neurodiverse students, and we were doing great things, and it changed. And I also realized now doing Taekwondo from a young age, like, helped me. That physical thing grounded me. It turned my brain off. It's why I loved it. But yeah, and then suddenly that class was full and it was impossible to do anything there. It was like, and we struggled because everybody had different needs. And it turned out, we found out that the local child psychologist was saying, go to this master. He's been doing wonderful things for these students. He's helped them. And then suddenly we had a class that was the majority of students were neurodiverse. And it just, we had to diverse and split everybody up so that it wasn't just then trying to count it. And I think Sarah said, not presuming that people need extra accounting and help. Like the last thing I needed as a university or school student was a moving deadline. Sometimes we can overcompensate towards too much compassion. And it's like, no, I need boundaries. Otherwise I'll never, so long as my PhD, I could kick it down the road. I kicked it down the road. It was only when I was going to be booted out of my university. Yeah, I finished, so it's like respecting that and again, also like not making square pegs fit round holes, don't be trying to kind of overwhelm and push people to be fitting certain ways of doing things. If it's not, it's recognizing, I think, giving options, I think changing things up, changing the learning environment up. We even just in martial arts, like not even in the school, we'd switch our classrooms. We'd go do the warm-ups outside sometimes. We'd change it up. We'd deliberately try to actually build in distractions. With the advanced students, you're like getting people to be doing patterns facing away from each other blindfolded, or with people trying to distract them to try to help people kind of change it up. But yeah, I'm sort of repeating myself a little bit, but it's but for me, with like university and with my language teaching, it's just trying to respect that there's different ways. And sometimes I need to, when I teach a mix of adults and kids. And when I'm teaching kids and I recognize that some kids have got an excess of energy or some kids are really struggling to focus, I will actually introduce teaching language with movement and dancing and games. And that becomes something the kids get right into. But I don't only do that. There's not one fix. The most important thing is diverse environments, diverse exercises, and being compassionate, but also recognizing some needs seem mean, like a hard boundary, and saying no special consideration, that's the deadline. And if you don't make that deadline, you don't. And sometimes you need to follow up on that consequence, because otherwise I won't learn. Like I didn't learn. If I could get away with it, I got away with it. Like it wasn't until it hurt that I got something done. But yeah, anyway, that was a bit of I just had a bunch of green tea, and I think the caffeine's kind of finally get in. But
well, no, they're all great answers. I'm thinking we're coming up for time, and it's our last session. So I'm wondering if there are any like nuggets or gems of information that you want to get out there in the world about ADHD before we draw to a close. Probably loads, I imagine.
If you have any hesitation about getting a diagnosis because you're afraid of having this stamp on your forehead, go for it. Like I said in the very first session, it's liberating. it has allowed me to finally get to the source of all my problems, and now I dare to be myself. So don't hesitate, do it.
Great advice. Great advice. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think jumping with what Saskia said, I think one thing that really drove me nuts was people trying to reassure me that we overuse labels. It's okay. You're not, it's recognizing that if someone says that and that's especially if someone's saying like, I think I might have ADHD or whatever, don't try to reassure them thinking it's a bad thing. I think it's for me, ADHD is not an excuse. It doesn't give me permission to be lazy or to procrastinate or whatever. It helps me understand how I work and who I am. It's a part of who I am. I am ADHD. I always have been. It doesn't change who I am. But it helps me be kinder to who I am and work with who I am. And I think if you're a teacher or a boss, it's just respecting that people's minds are different. And if someone's not performing well, there might be a reason. So finding out why, being open to the fact that we can, and being open to actually that we don't have to have a cookie cutter, no noise cancelling headphones in the classroom or workplace. No, this is how we work and you must fit the rules. It's recognizing that a little bit of flexibility and working with people's strengths and needs, you will get results all the time.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. Sarah, JPB, do you want to add your nugget, your little gem before we go?
Yeah, I guess I just sort of think that it doesn't always look like the stereotype. We said that back 4 weeks ago, right? All of us here don't look like the stereotype, whether it's for me in terms of race and for everyone else in terms of gender identity. And frankly, also in terms of age, and that it's still stereotyped as a child's disease. I'm not saying it's a disease, I'm saying, but that's how people think of it. And I doubt anyone on here is not empathetic. Why would you be watching all of this? So this is not a message for the people actually watching, but for the people who are watching, who have people that they know who, even if they're not cruel about it, simply have a lot of impatience for us. Maybe let them understand the things that you've learned here if there were things that you took away from it. That's the guidance I would give to people. And if there's one thing to take away otherwise, all of us need to just keep talking about it. It's easier to say when your career is in a better place, so you don't have to worry as much about it. But I think if we're people who are open enough to be doing this a bunch of times, we're probably people who need to be heard from. So it's not going to change if we don't actually say anything.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely. Thank you, JPB. And Sarah, any last questions?
I can't follow those three. They were great. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to add. But yeah, I mean, I think this kind of thing that it's not an excuse. ADHD isn't an excuse, as Kristen said, but it is an explanation. So being, if you are diagnosed or you believe that you have ADHD, being a little bit kinder to yourself is gonna really help. And trying to continue to find resources like this one, but then also trying to share it with people who might doubt that the thing is real. It's real. It's really real. And I think this is what we're trying to tell you. So yeah, sharing it beyond, your friends, your family, your colleagues, and so on, and kind of be clear about what you need and why you need that, whether you're a student at school or whether you're working in an organization or whatever it is. And maybe also just to let us know whether, what you did take away from it, whether you did find this useful, whether you'd like to see more of this kind of stuff. We'd love to know this as well. So that we can organize some more things going forward. And finally, it's not a nugget, but it's just a thank you to everybody who not only watched and participated in the comment box and so on, but to all of you who participated in the live and shared your experiences. It can be quite scary to do this in a public forum. So that's really appreciated that you come here and, you know, tell us how you experience ADHD as well. So thank you so much
welcome.
for that.
Absolutely. Well, I think you said it all, Sarah. Very good,
no.
Kristen. Have you got?
I was going to say one thing, what Sarah said reminded me, and it's something that I can only speak to my experience, but I was afraid of stepping up for a while because my imposter syndrome kicked in and I didn't think I really had it. I thought it was just like internet and phone apps had been teaching me to be distracted. And it's true, there are patterns that can be similar to ADHD that our way of networked working, emailing, pinging, all these things can condition your brain to be seeking out the dopamine hit to kind of have ADHD-like symptoms. It's not to deny that that's still not real, but it's why it is so important to get a professional diagnosis to understand if you need specific medical help. As JPB said, there's an issue with misfiring neurotransmitters. ADHD is a very real thing. And this is where it goes right back to childhood. And I was speaking with my friend who is going through this process now, and she was going through the imposter syndrome. And I was like, look, I've known you since school. We were both the same before the internet. Like, we can't, this has been the way we've been since forever. But even if you have affinities, a lot of the coping mechanisms, and even if it's not the medication, but the coping mechanisms we use can help you. So even if you don't have formal diagnosed ADHD, but you feel a lot of identification with what you've heard, it's not to say that the tools we use can't be of service to you. So that's just the last thing, is formal diagnosis really important, because the other thing's a real thing that we're only just starting to study and understand now, is whether or not that change is permanent to the brain, but it's happening. So anyway, I'll pipe back down. But
No, I think we could talk for hours, couldn't we, really? But unfortunately, we do need to draw things to a conclusion. So as Sarah said, thank you to everyone who's attended all the sessions. Thank you to all our panelists for sharing. And thank you to Sarah, my co-host. And we'll take account of the feedback you give us and maybe be back with some more we need to talk about in the future. Bye for now.
thank you, ladies.